So can Trump win the Republican nomination for president, even with indictments looming over his head? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So there's this developing narrative in the media that Trump is damaged, and as a result, Republicans are moving away from him. They seem to be putting a lot of their hopes into Ron Desantis, who, by all impressions, seems to be a flawed candidate, to be sure. I mean, this is the guy who said that the Ukraine war is nothing more than a border dispute between Ukraine and Russia. Seems like he's a little bit out of touch there. He's also been diving all in on the whole woke agenda thing, which, from most of what I've seen, actually doesn't really motivate most voters across the country. Who doesn't motivate? Well, it motivates Republicans. I mean, check out this recent CNN poll here that showed that Republicans care more about finding a candidate they can agree with than one who can beat Joe Biden, which is something that myself, as a Biden supporter and a Democrat, and all Biden supporters and Democrats out there should be quite happy about. Let them nominate the least electable person possible. That's what I say. In fact, the data seems to indicate that this whole culture war focus is part of why the Republicans did so poorly in the 2022 elections. So my attitude is, let them continue to focus on it. But with that being said, the question remains, can Trump win the Republican nomination again? Much as I hate to gamble on this issue, results seem to indicate that he is not a strong standard bearer for the Republican Party. I mean, after all, he's basically lost the last 3 elections for Republicans, and the only election that he did win was basically a fluke when he was running against perhaps the least popular Democratic candidate that we've ever nominated. Nevertheless, as this recent article from the New York Times points out, it appears that Trump's base of strong support seems to be going down. Now, this should really not be surprising to anybody who's actually a close observer of political trends, because after all, when he was president, people supported him because he was the president, and if they defined themselves as Republicans, then an attack on him was like an attack on them. It was an identity issue. Since he's no longer president, not only has he fallen out of the headlines, but essentially people feel freer to criticize him, especially after the results of the 2022 election. The fact of the matter is, though, that even now, 43% of Republican voters say that they view him strongly favorably, with 35% saying they view him somewhat favorably. And of the people who are Republicans, 33% view themselves as Trump first rather than party first, which frankly, there are very few politicians who command that kind of loyalty. It's like that saying that he once made about being able to stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and he wouldn't lose any support. Certainly that's the case among that 33% of Republicans. But so just how much of the base is that? And is that going to be enough to bring him home? I mean, after all, it seems like he's slipping, isn't he? Well, there are a couple of signs that that's not the case. I mean, we've got Ron Desantis, who people point to as being Trump's strongest competitor. Well, according to Nate Cohn, who's done some analysis on this point, it appears that since the election of 2022, when DeSantis kind of had a big night, he's been slipping since then relative to Trump. Cohn points out that while it's difficult to come up with specific numbers, because the polls are kind of all over the place with these, and it has a lot to do with sampling methodology and the questions that they ask and that type of thing, but the one thing that is absolutely consistent through all the polls is that over time, the gap between Trump and DeSantis has been widening, with Trump gaining ground and DeSantis losing ground. So despite this slippage of Donald Trump within Republicans, it appears that as Republicans are getting to know DeSantis better, they're not so impressed with him. But what's more is, at this time in the campaign back in 2016, so we're talking now spring of 2015, where did Trump stand relative to his competitors? Well, as it turns out, he wasn't the leading candidate at that point. No, former Governor Jeb Bush of the Bush clan was. No, at the time, Bush had 19% support. This is actually the summer before the election, while Trump had only 12% support. And Trump was followed closely by Mike Huckabee at 8%, Ben Carson at 7%, and Rand Paul at 7%. So in other words, being at 33% strong support in the Republican primaries at this point in the campaign is pretty good for Donald Trump. In fact, it's almost 3 times what he had at this point in the campaign before 2016 when he won the nomination. So when people start telling you that Donald Trump is slipping in the polls and that he's in trouble relative to Ron Desantis, take that with a grain of salt. Despite the claims of some never-Trumpers to the contrary, the Republican Party is still Donald Trump's Republican Party. Of course, a lot can change over the duration of the campaign, but if I were a betting man right now, I'd be putting my money behind Donald Trump winning the Republican nomination. And that's what the data seems to be showing at this point. Well, if you want to see more about who's the winner when you contrast Biden with Trump, check out this video over here. You'll see that Biden versus Trump in a direct head-to-head on the State of the Union speech strongly favors Joe Biden. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.